Well, good afternoon, buenas tardes. I hope all of you are doing well this evening. Glad to have you here. Bon après-midi, which I just learned is Haitian Creole for good afternoon. Thank you for tuning into this Zoom update. My name is Lisa Cathelyn, and I serve as the Justice and Peace Coordinator for the U.S. Federation of the Sisters of St. Joseph. We have folks from various religious communities and geographies here tonight. So I just wanted to offer a little bit of context of who and what the Federation is. Some of you may already know, but that's okay. The Federation is a dynamic union of all the Sisters of St. Joseph of the United States. And these sisters claim a common origin in the foundation at Le Puy, France in 1650. Sisters, associates, agrégés, partners in mission, St. Joseph workers, they're all committed to serving and caring for the dear neighbor. The Federation includes 16 congregations and provinces that stretch from Los Angeles to Long Island. We have nearly 3,000 sisters who we count as our members, as well as 3,000 associates and many other partners in mission. Tonight's post-Title 42 What's Next event, which is where you're at right now, is hosted by the Federation's Immigration Working Group. And as a reminder, if you ever have to dip out at any time, this session is being recorded and will be available later this week on our YouTube channel. And I just ask that folks remain muted. We've enabled live transcription in case that's helpful to you. And if you do have any tech issues, please look for the two folks who are labeled tech in their name. We will have some time at the end, about 10 to 15 minutes or so, for some audience Q&A. So if there are questions that you specifically have that might be arising as our speakers share, feel free to put those in the chat. Thank you. So 1 month ago, on May 11th, a public health order known as Title 42 ended. Title 42 came into action in March 2020 at the start of the nation's public health emergency. And this policy, as many folks know who are gathered here, gave the US government authority to expel people who crossed the border without giving them a chance to seek asylum. It was, in a word, a really devastating policy decision, and that resulted in millions of border expulsions, and really a squashing of the international right to seek asylum for migrants from across the world who were seeking safety. So what comes next? What's going on right now at the border? Tonight, we'll explore the realities of the US-Mexico border and current immigration policies that exist after Title 42, so that all of us, whoever we are better equipped to serve, advocate for, and lift up the dignity of migrants. You know, there's a lot of noise around migration. There's maybe been headlines around border surges. There's been images of tent camps, devastating headlines, including of a dear child who died in border custody recently. And I think it's really important that in cutting through that noise, we remember that these are human beings, God's beloved children, our dear neighbors. And tonight we'll hear from two leading organizations who are accompanying and providing, I would say, life-saving, legal, cultural, and linguistically appropriate services to migrants. We'll be introduced to both of them in a moment, but first I want to bring in a member of our Immigration Working Group who will lead us in an opening prayer. And in a moment, I'll share my screen with that prayer. Maria Elena Perales is a longtime advocate for immigrant justice, and she serves as the Justice Director for the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange, California. So Maria Elena, thanks for offering to lead us in a little prayer. Let me, I'm gonna have to get an enabled share screen. One moment, please. Thanks. Okay. All right, thumbs up, you can see it okay?
Yes. Thanks, Lisa. Welcome, everyone. We are here to pray for our brothers and sisters. This prayer, remembering the immigrant. Our scriptures tells us of God's special concern for the alien and the stranger, or as one or as more contemporary translations say, the immigrant. We remember our religious heritage in responding to the gospel, called to serve the poor, the oppressed of our society. We respond to the call today by welcoming the immigrants and by seeking comprehensive, compassionate, humane, and just immigration reform in our country. O holy God, your daughters and sons from all peoples of the world, regardless of borders, praise you. We praise you and give you thanks because you have placed in our hands the migrant pilgrims who alongside us make the earth flourish and produce and enrich us with their own beautiful cultures and arts. We praise you and give you thanks because you walk always with those who cross borders in search of well-being, doing their part in building the world you entrusted us. We praise you and give you thanks for your blessings on all migrants, and those who cross all the borders around the world. Let us pray today for our dear neighbor who is blinded by fear of migrants and imprisoned by ignorance of the gifts they offer us and contributions they make to our country. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Maria Elena, for leading that prayer. I'm now going to turn it over to another member of our wonderful working group, and that is Kasia Sainer, who serves as the Director of Social and Environmental Justice. She's actually just going to introduce, I don't know if Guerline has joined us yet, but you're just going to go ahead and introduce our speaker from Kino Border Initiative. Go ahead and take it away.
Great. This is an honor. So Guerline Jozef is the co-founder and executive director of the Haitian Bridge Alliance in San Diego, California. Guerline is a human rights advocate who dedicates her life to bringing awareness to issues that affect us all, locally and globally, such as immigration, domestic violence, child sex abuse, and other human rights issues. Ms. Jozef was named one of Politico's 2021 40 Most Influential People on Race, Politics, and Policy in the United States for her leadership, and is the recipient of several prestigious awards, including the 2021 Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award and the 2022 American Immigration Lawyers Association Arthur C. Helton Human Rights Award. She has been featured in Forbes magazine, has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Politico, Time magazine, and many other publications. Guerline has also testified in front of the United Nations and the United States Congress to demand the humane treatment of Black immigrants.
Guerline will be joining us in a few minutes. I just got a text from her that she was getting situated at a place that she has some stable internet. So join us in a few. So if you want to go ahead and introduce Zoe, that would be great.
Great. Can't wait for her to hop on. Zoe is also with us from Kino Border Initiative. Zoe Martens is an advocacy coordinator at Kino Border Initiative in Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, where she focuses on access to asylum and border patrol abuses. She holds a master's in human rights from the Hubert H. Humphrey School of Political Affairs and has previously worked on the Mexico-Guatemala border in domestic violence advocacy with migrant communities in Minnesota. Welcome.
So Zoe, let's just get started and dive right in. For folks who may not be familiar with your organization, could you tell us a little bit more about the organization and also where you're situated on the border? I think geographic context is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having me in this space. I am advocacy coordinator at Kino Border Initiative, and we are a binational Catholic organization rooted specifically in Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. So that is located about an hour south of Tucson, Arizona, where I am right now. And we've been providing services in Nogales for about 15 years now. And the vision that really guides our work is migration with dignity. And we have kind of three main ways that we work toward that vision. So one of the principal kinds of work that we do is direct humanitarian assistance and holistic accompaniment of people who are migrating. And this looks like many different services that we have at our service center in Nogales. We do have an overnight shelter, mostly for families and people traveling with children. We serve daily meals to people both in our shelter and folks who are staying in other places or other shelters. We offer psychological support, legal consultations, medical consultations, and many other services. So that's really the root of the work that we do and have been doing in Nogales for quite some time now. And we're lucky to also have some other aspects of our work that also support this vision that we have. We also facilitate education and encounter between people who are migrating and other communities, really in the hopes that this will transform people and transform communities towards solidarity with migrants. And we consistently host groups from high schools, universities, different parishes, and we invite them to Kino for immersion experiences where they're able to get to know our shelter, talk with people who are staying at our shelter and who are in migration, and have a whole range of experiences to learn more about what it might be like to be in migration currently. And then the third way that we work towards this vision is our policy advocacy sphere, where I'm more involved at Kino, working for really more humane and more just immigration policies, both in Mexico and in the US. And then I'll just give a quick overview kind of who we see at our migrant center, who are some of the people that we work with every day. We work with folks who are on all different parts of their migration journey. So we see a lot of people who are arriving and hoping to seek asylum in the US, which will be kind of the focus of our conversation today. And we also consistently see people who have been deported, either who have been apprehended trying to enter the US, or people who have been living in the US for 10, 15, 20, 25 years and have been deported to Mexico. And we give services to all of those folks. Consistently, the majority of people that we see arriving are Mexican nationals, mostly from some specific states in southern Mexico in particular, where there are some very high rates of violence by organized crime specifically. So people from the states of Guerrero, Michoacan, Oaxaca, and Chiapas are folks that we see quite a bit at Kino. And we also see people from many other countries and regions, from the countries of Central America, South America, in particular people from Venezuela, we've been seeing a lot recently, from Cuba, Haiti, and many other countries. And the one last kind of overview of who we see I'll give, which is really important, we do kind of a brief intake interview with everyone who arrives, and that's where we are able to gather some of this data to better understand, patterns and who it is that we're providing services to. And really consistently, I would say 75% or more of people who arrive at Kino report leaving due to violence or persecution in their home country, their home state town. So really the vast majority of people that we work with on a daily basis are people hoping to seek asylum, people who are arriving and trying to navigate what the current asylum policies are. So we're able to really, in speaking with them, see the lived experiences of these policies that continue to attack the asylum system, unfortunately. So I'm happy to be here today and be able to share some more things, specifically what we're seeing in Nogales and what we've heard from folks. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that really robust introduction. I'm kind of struck that you have both really immediate needs, kind of that sense of charity of people need food just to survive, people need a safe place to sleep, and also this advocacy piece. And I'm just curious what you're seeing, is there any difference between what we saw under Title 42, like May 10th versus May 12th? And what you're kind of, just anything you're really noticing? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I can say is that all of us at Kino in those days especially, were kind of waiting in a lot of uncertainty, right, about what was going to happen. We were hoping that Title 42 was finally going to fall, but we also knew that the Biden administration kind of had these plans in place. for this new rule, the asylum ban, as we're calling it, because that's a very accurate name for it, really. So we are lucky to have a partnership with the Florence Project, who's a legal service provider here in Arizona. And in collaboration with them, we hosted kind of a town hall, which we do periodically whenever there's a big policy change, to try our best to be sharing the information we have with people who are waiting in Nogales. Many people who have been waiting for months, if not coming on a year, to be able to access the asylum system. So we did have that town hall with folks, which was obviously very bittersweet, which was challenging of, wanting to celebrate the end of Title 42 that we've been fighting against for 3 years, but at the same time, having to situate ourselves in the reality of the new asylum ban and trying to explain this rule. It's so complex. I'm still trying to figure it out. I think many organizations are still trying to figure out the actual implications of it. So that is a challenge, but that's kind of where we grounded ourselves over those few days, was hosting that town hall and trying our best to, share as much information as we had with folks. And things have shifted over the past few weeks, which I'll maybe get into in a little bit. Right away, we wanted to be monitoring the port of entry in Nogales, knowing that things were going to shift. Because previously, if someone tried to approach the officials there at the port of entry under Title 42, they would just be told there was no asylum, there was no access, you're just not given any sort of entry. But with the end of Title 42, that was kind of one of the question marks of what is the treatment going to be for people who approach the port of entry and try to talk with the US officials. So we sent some staff out there to try to monitor, and the first few days were very calm. We didn't really see anyone trying to approach the port of entry, but that did shift in later weeks as people continued to struggle to use this CBP1 appointment process, which we can get into as well. People did begin to approach the port of entry, and that's a situation that we've been monitoring. So I do have more detail about that, but I don't know if Guerline is with us yet or not quite
I'm
yet.
not sure. She might not be, but I do have a couple of questions from that. So we're talking about people waiting months or even years. So what were those conditions like for folks that are not on a border community and maybe we don't get, like, what were those conditions like where people are waiting?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that was really the reality for, all of Title 42. For those 3 years, it was an indefinite wait as to when you would be able to seek asylum in the US. So for, people who are Mexican nationals, this was a reality of internal displacement. If you're coming, say, from the state of Guerrero, which is pretty far south in Mexico, you're living in this border town in Nogales, and you're displaced within your own country. You're still fleeing from conditions that are in that same country you're stuck in. So definitely a lot of safety and security risks and issues that have been widely documented, especially thinking about people who are fleeing from organized crime. These are highly organized networks that have contacts all over the nation, if not internationally. So that's, a large concern for people. And I'll say for both Mexican nationals and non-Mexican nationals, just general conditions of danger that's posed by organized crime as well as Mexican authorities, unfortunately, is something we hear consistently. Extortion, kidnapping by Mexican authorities are all things that are very common. So those are the kind of safety conditions we're looking at. And then just really a lot of challenges in accessing basic resources. Things are more expensive on the border due to it being close to the US, and people in Nogales take advantage of migrants who are stranded, knowing that they're stuck there for the time being. So we hear about just rent prices being, completely like put up for people who are migrants. Just things like trying to pay for food consistently, trying to get medical care, a lot of challenges for families enrolling their children in schools as well, both for Mexican nationals and non-Mexican nationals, even though, Mexican agencies consistently said that all children should have access to schooling, but in practice that was not often happening and students were being turned away. So definitely a lot of specific challenges for children and adolescents as well, who are just kind of in this holding pattern of uncertainty for really long periods of time. So those were some of the challenges.
Thanks for giving us painting that picture. I think that's important. And we're just going to shift gears really quickly. It looks like Guerline is able to join. Hello, welcome. We were able to offer a brief bio of who you are, but if you feel settled enough, we'd love to hear a little bit more about your organization and its context, and where you are situated on the border. So Guerline, welcome to this space.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, Zoe, for this amazing setting up about what's happening at the border. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Guerline Jozef. Hi, Maria Elena. Good to see you. Hello, everyone. So good to see you all. My name is Guerline Jozef. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Haitian Bridge Alliance, the Black Immigrants Bell Fund, and the Cameroon Advocacy Network. We are the only Black-led Haitian women-led organization that is working at the US-Mexico border with a focus on people of African descent. We say that we went to the border for the Haitians, but when we got there, we found people from Afghanistan, from India, from China, from Cameroon. So we went for the Haitians, but we stayed for everyone. And as we say in Haiti, un pile main chay palou, which means many hands lighten the load. And that is in that spirit that I join you today. I am currently in New York. I told Lisa I was running from the funeral home. I'm sure you all heard about the 8-year-old little girl who died in CBP custody a few weeks ago. And unfortunately, we are being tasked to represent the family. So we just left the funeral home to make the arrangements for the funeral to be happening Friday and Saturday. So we'll definitely need your prayers as we go through this ordeal. In addition to that little girl, we have also lost 4 other people, 2 newborn babies. We were able to get emergency crossing from Reynosa to McAllen. Unfortunately, it was too late and they did not make it. In addition to that, on Sunday, we lost another brother in Reynosa, and another one in Tijuana. So because we cover all the borders with our partners on the ground, from Tapachula to Chiapas area, where you heard Zoe say, people in this area are fleeing, but this entire state is being used as a prison to hold migrants in Mexico. So we really work with our partners at every port of entry to make sure that we provide support, but at the same time serve in a very culturally focused idea, understanding that the majority of people of African descent, unfortunately, they don't have a place to hide, right? Unlike our community members from South and Central America, the moment a Black person shows up in Mexico, they know they don't belong. So this has become one of the main issues we are dealing with. It's a community that is hyper visibilized, but completely invisible at the same time. So with that, we provide humanitarian assistance in Mexico, but in the US, we do everything from humanitarian assistance, direct services, legal services, organizing, advocacy, and heavy on policy. We also do a lot of work vis-a-vis the UN to center the reality of people in migration and making sure that we hold people accountable, right? As people are leaving home countries due to extreme violence and extreme conditions to come to seek asylum at the border. Zoe mentioned Title 42 before. The Haitian Bridge Alliance literally sent the very first letter to then President Trump, I hate to go there, to ask him to not implement Title 42 as a result of the COVID. And it took a 3-year battle from Trump to the current administration to finally get Title 42 reversed. But unfortunately, as you heard from Zoe as well, Title 42 ended Title 8 became in full effect. In addition to that, what is called expedite removal, and we'll go into more information about that, and then the asylum ban. And what we are seeing right now with the asylum ban is that the United States is requesting that people apply for asylum in places like Costa Rica, which they just finalized today, Guatemala and Colombia. That's where we are telling people to ask for asylum. And only if they get denied, they can proceed to come to the US to ask for asylum. I will stop here because I know we'll be going into more discussion, and we'll be able to explain more those policies, but we really wanted to kind of center the fact that we are at the US-Mexico border, but we are also in the country from California to DC, fighting on behalf of those who are extremely vulnerable. Thank you again so much for having us.
Thanks for making the time, Guerline and Zoe, both of you. Both of you have touched a little bit on like the policy of Title 42 and what exists now. I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit more about what's on the books today. It seems pretty confusing. Number one, it's confusing for me. And number two, how is that message getting communicated or not to migrants? Like, what is that? So if either of you wanted to start with that, that would be great.
Okay, I can start. I'll do my best. Yeah, so as I said, it's a complex law that has all these different kind of layers. But the way I try to explain it is that this new asylum ban creates what's called a presumption of ineligibility for asylum. So we're presuming that you are not eligible for asylum if you have not used legal pathways. Okay, and the government has specific things that they consider to be legal pathways or the correct way to seek asylum, right? So first of all, just reflecting on that, this rule is not responsive to what the lived experiences of asylum seekers are. An asylum seeker is someone who is fleeing for their life, for access to safety, access to freedom. And most of these people don't have the luxury to be kind of planning when, how they're going to arrive at the border and ask for protection. But what this law is requiring, excuse me, of people is to use a legal pathway, the main one, which is an appointment through the CBP-1 application. So it's literally a phone application you download in the App Store or whatever you have on your Android, and you use that application to seek an appointment to have a date and a time to present at the port of entry. This has been in existence for a while now. It was actually being used under Title 42 as well to ask for an exception to the rule. And over time, some changes have been made to the application, but we have ample examples and documentation of how discriminatory this application is, how difficult it is to use and to access. But what the rule is saying, if you don't use this application and you show up without an appointment to the port of entry, you're subject to this ban. And the one kind of specificity I'll point out is this ban applies to non-Mexican nationals. It applies to people coming from countries other than Mexico, because another aspect to the ban is this like transit ban aspect that we are just talking about, where the US government is saying, if you come from Guatemala further south or another country, you've passed through some other country in transit to the US border. So why don't you first seek asylum somewhere else is really what this law is saying. And so it creates all of those extra barriers that someone needs to somehow get through just to be able to be eligible for asylum in the US. And so some people in Nogales and across the border have been trying for months to use the CBP-1 application, have not been able to get an appointment. And so they've decided they're going to wait in line at a port of entry to wait to be processed by CBP, by Customs and Border Protection. And if those people are non-Mexican nationals, they're presenting without an appointment, so they will be subject to this ban and have a much more difficult process because they didn't follow the quote unquote legal pathway.
Okay. And Guerline, could you share a little bit more about how, I know that there's been a lot of documentation of the issues with CBP-1. Could you share a little bit more about that?
Yes, no, thank you so much. And as Zoe mentioned, the CBP1 app that they started in January, Lisa, as you said, how are people knowing, getting to know about those policies? Because imagine you fled your country and you were running for your life. You go through the Darien Gap. You've heard of the heartbreaking stories from the Darien Gap. And I myself went to the Darien Gap to see, because I couldn't comprehend how people survive. Just surviving the Darien Gap alone is a miracle. So every person that we meet at the border who tells you that they had gone through Colombia and Panama, know that they are a living miracle. Because I went there and I don't understand how people survive. So basically what we started seeing is as they released the CBP1 app, January 12th of this year, we were on the ground doing outreach and education, explaining to people that this is the only way you can have access to protection is to use this app. For you to use this app, you have to have a phone and you have to have internet. What we started seeing is that a lot of people did not have a phone. And if they did have a phone, they didn't have access to internet. A lot of people didn't have money to be able to put minutes in their phone to be able to use the app. And the app wasn't working. So we really took it upon ourselves to create step-by-step videos and submit that to the US government and tell them, these are the issues we are seeing on the ground at every single port of entry, and we are asking them to try to fix the app. Before, at the beginning, the app did not recognize dark-skinned people. If you look like me, you are fresh out of luck, because the app will not recognize your facial, your skin tone. Anyone who had dark skin could not be recognized. We have worked for 2 months. They finally have fixed that part of it. Now people with dark skin are able to have access easier than they were before. In addition to that, the process that you had to use, by the time you get to halfway, all the appointments have been taken. So it was very difficult for a family of 2 or 3 be able to get an appointment, because you have to wake up every morning at 6 a.m. and you pray to God that is literally a lotto, the lottery. And you pray to God that today you might find an appointment, because they were only allowing 600 people total across the border to be able to get access to that. And once you get the appointment, you have to wait and you have to present yourself to get a chance. So the app itself has been extremely difficult for all people, but specifically for darker skinned people. In addition to that, as Zoe mentioned, the outside of Title 42 and now outside of the app, there's no way, if you have extreme conditions, if you are a pregnant woman who is 8-9 months pregnant, if you are a person with severe illness due to the journey you have made, you don't have access to any type of protection. Now, if you are sick and you're at the border, and that's why we are doing funeral every single day, because if you are sick, you're at the border, you have to do the CBP1 app and you have to wait. And sometimes, unfortunately, people end up dying instead of getting the protection that they need.
So are all of the ports of entry requiring use of this app? It's like
Yes.
Anywhere, if I were to try to enter as a national from any country, it'd be like, except for maybe Mexican nationals, any port of entry, I'm trying to enter through my Goodwill,
Well, yeah, including that Mexican nationals. So
Okay.
this is the only thing that is available for everyone. So if you choose to go outside of that, then you have extra penalties that is being put on you.
Okay.
The CBP1 is the only quote unquote official, quote unquote legal way for you to get access to protection right now. We are fighting to get some type of way for extremely vulnerable medical cases, but nothing is in place right now. In addition to those things, people from Haiti Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela can be returned back to Mexico. So the US has expanded their policies into Mexico for people from those 4 countries. So if you are from Haiti, from Cuba, from Venezuela, from Guatemala, and you try to enter at the US-Mexico border, when you enter, they're not supposed to be asking you certain questions, but that's what they are doing right now. And then they can decide to send you back to Mexico because the US has made an agreement with Mexico that they can receive up to 30,000 people from those 4 countries being deported back to Mexico. And since Title 42 has lifted on May 12, we started seeing an increased number of people that present themselves even with the CBP1 app. They go ahead, they wait the 3 months, the 6 months, they finally get an appointment, they go to the appointment, and we are seeing a lot of Haitians being returned back to Mexico without any explanation.
That sounds really terrible. It just sounds really not accessible in any sense of the word. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about one thing I feel like I haven't heard so much in the conversation, like nationally, is like, are people being detained? You know, I remember under the previous administration, protests around kids in cages, right? Like we have those images and those memories, and I'm wondering, like, is that still happening? Is that not happening? What is detainment looking like? Like, are families being separated? So that's something I would like to hear more about.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to what I know about the policy. I mean, yes, people are being detained. It always happens and continues to occur. We know that families are being detained. For example, the tragic case that Guerline just spoke to us about, the 8-year-old girl who died in Border Patrol custody, is, you know, an example of families who are being subjected to detention. And, you know, it is written into the new rule that certain people will be placed in expedited removal. So this like fast deportation process, right? And so what they're going to do if you're subject to expedited removal, so an example of someone who would be subject, it's like there's so many different routes in this rule, but for example, if you're a Mexican national and you choose to, or you're forced to, better said, present between ports of entry, so you try to cross through the desert or find, you know, an area in the wall where you're able to cross, and you're apprehended, they would subject you to expedited removal. So you would be placed into CBP custody, and the Department of Homeland Security wants a fear interview to happen, I believe, within 24 hours, if not 24 hours, 48, to, you know, to give, that's like the max time. So within that first day or so that you're apprehended and put into custody, you're going to have a telephonic interview with an asylum officer who's going to ask you some questions about your fear. That's kind of one of the first like filters you have to get through to be able to continue in the asylum process. So they're really pushing this expedited interview, which we're very concerned about, because within CBP custody, I mean, we know it's been widely documented, the conditions are horrible, and there is no meaningful access to legal counsel. Currently, what exists is a list of phone numbers, some sort of phone booth that you are going to have access to. You can place a call to an attorney to try to get some orientation, try to get some advice, but there's no way for attorneys to return your calls. So say no one picks up, they don't have a way to call you back. Maybe your interview's, you know, going to be within the next 24 hours. It's a Saturday, and so the legal providers don't have the capacity to pick up. I mean, these are the kinds of conditions that people are going to be subject to these interviews. So I know that detention is definitely being used in that way to kind of facilitate this expedited processing, which has really deadly consequences for people who are trying to express the reasons that they're fleeing, but you're kind of being shuffled through this process in fast forward. I haven't spoken with a ton of folks who have been detained, so I don't know if you have any more information.
Yes, thank you, Zoe. Actually, detention is one of the things we are terrified about. As Zoe mentioned, with the expedited removal, we are seeing a lot of people being funneled back again through ICE. And for those of us who are In California, we know very well the impact in Adelanto, in Mesa Verde, in Otay Mesa, in all of the different places that we have. And I know many of you have visited people in immigration detentions before. So one of the fear that we have is the lack of access to counsel, lack of access to language, lack of access to community support. Our hotline is really going 24/7 right now with people calling, asking for support. Unfortunately, as Zoe mentioned, when somebody calls from detention, there's no way for you to just call them back. We have to wait. Hopefully that person will call you, and then you'll kind of see what you can do to help. But with the credible fear interview that Zoe mentioned, now imagine you are a person who just escaped extreme political violence in your home country, or escaped gang violence in your home country, or whatever it might be, and then you are being put in a room with a person in uniform interrogating you, and you are in fear, and you are not in your right mental state, right? Because you are literally still in your, fleeing and fighting for your life, and they expect you to give them answers that can be and will be used against you. And at any given moment, they can tell you, I don't trust what you're saying. I don't believe what you're saying. So therefore, they will give you a negative result on your fear interview, and then you are deportable, right? Just to share a brief story with you, one of the attorneys called, we were able to get in touch with one woman, and we're able to get her counsel. And that is in Adelanto, actually, in California. And the judge, after counsel, she was literally trying to gain as much strength as she could to share the violence that she had, the violence and abuse she was subject to. As a woman, the judge looked at her and said, being sexually violated does not consider abuse enough for you to get protection. And we could not believe that. But she decided that she wasn't credible enough. She didn't suffer enough for her to get protection. So we are now appealing that decision, but that is what we are dealing with right now.
Yeah, thanks for kind of bringing that to the fore. Of these credible fear interviews sounds like they're re-traumatizing, to be honest, of just like you're in a space that, how scary that must be. So I want to turn a little bit to, we kind of have a sense of what the policies have been, what's going on the ground. We have a lot of folks on this call who are from all over the country, again, some at border communities and some not. And one of the questions we got over and over in the Zoom response form was, how do we prepare to receive migrants on this side? How do we prepare knowing that this is very murky right now? What's most needed? Is there anything that can be done? It feels really dire, to be honest. And so I'm just wondering if there are some practical tips or things that we can be doing to advocate in our spheres.
Yeah, there are a few different things that we can do, especially those of us who have the privilege of being U.S. citizens or being documented in the U.S., even through TPS and other immigration status. One of the things is the parole program. Each and every one of us can become a sponsor. What we are seeing is that a lot of people might have a family member here, they might have housing waiting for them, but that person is undocumented, right? So we are in desperate need of people to say, yes, we will sponsor that person, and that person will be able to come, quote unquote, legally, right? And then they could be at the border if they are from Haiti, Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela. They could be in their home country, they could be in a different country, as long as they need somebody to sponsor them. That's the number one thing we are really asking U.S. citizens and people who have U.S. Immigration status in the U.S. to become a sponsor, and we can definitely work with them to go through the process. It's very simple. It's very easy, but you have to have legal immigration status in the United States to do that. That's the number one. The number two, we are fighting, to get new policies that are humane in Congress, in asking the White House to also be able to do some executive orders to provide protection for DACA and TPS recipients who are already in the United States, who have been in the US for the past 30 years, but still living without documentation under the fear of being deported at any moment. So we are asking for push for full documentation for DACA and TPS in the country. We are asking for support for newly arrived immigrants, because when an asylum seeker comes and they go through all of the things that Zoe mentioned, all of the things that I have mentioned, and they finally get released, they are released on deportation. And they have to continue to fight until they get a positive outcome that will turn them from an asylum seeker to an asylee. And as an asylee, they don't have anything. They don't have a social security. They don't have a work permit. They are literally, at the mercy of the community, because the government does not provide anything for them. Unlike refugees and unlike people who already have papers, asylum seekers don't have access to most of those things unless they are in California. They have a little bit of leeway in California and also in New York, but the majority of states, they don't have anything. And for people in Florida, you have heard the governor literally now telling even family members, if you have an undocumented person in your home or in your car, you could be arrested, right? So really asking for folks to push against those narratives and really trying to find ways to quote unquote support people to come here, what the administration called legally, through the parole program to become a sponsor. I will pass to Zoe, but I saw a question about how to become a sponsor. Yes, so to become a sponsor, there is the form that you have to fill out. And I would love to give you my contact information, my email, so that my humanitarian director can walk you through that. It's really very simple, but the main thing is making sure that you have the right legal status in the United States to be able to even start that process. But it's very simple.
That was great. Thank you for all of those really tangible things that the folks can be supporting with. I don't think I have a ton to add. I mean, I'll just uplift again, really focusing on the humanitarian reception for people who are arriving and people who are passing through all of these steps and obstacles that we just talked about that are absolutely re-traumatizing. So I think that's huge, right? All of the support networks that already exist. For example, we support folks in Nogales, Sonora when they are able to enter with an appointment or otherwise. They'll be in Nogales, Arizona. It's kind of a small town. We're lucky we have the support of Casalitas, is a local network here, who provides people transportation directly to Tucson, and they support them. They bring them to the airport once they have their ticket. Just that kind of accompaniment is so critical, because I can't imagine going through all of the things we've talked about and then arriving in Nogales, Arizona without really an idea of what comes next. And also highlighting the importance of access to legal counsel, any legal partnerships we can continue developing, because this asylum ban is going to continue to impact people. And that's where I think I still feel confused. There are folks who have been able to enter without this VP1 appointment. They are non-Mexican nationals. And we know this ban is going to be applied to them at some future point in their process, probably at their asylum hearing. Mm-hmm. And people need access to information about how this is going to impact them. So that's also something that's really front of mind.
May I add a narrative change? Because we see how the false narrative of who an immigrant is driving how people react and respond to quote unquote foreigners. And I think especially for those of us who are followers of Christ, to stand in the belief that who Christ has called us to be, right? And what kind of instruction was given to us by Christ himself to be able to welcome the strangers with dignity and be able to understand and shift the narrative, because too many times we hear the false negative narrative of who an immigrant is, of how an immigrant is. The past 5 years have been extremely difficult when it comes to that, and to really be an agent of change vis-a-vis the narrative that's being spread around, so that we can not only be able to change the mind of people, but really the heart. We really need to be able to change the heart of people so they can see those seeking protection and those seeking asylum as themselves, to put yourself in the shoes of those fleeing and seeking safety and protection.
Thanks for all those points, and we'll definitely follow up with people with that information around what are the requirements and responsibilities of being a sponsor, as well as our organizations that we've highlighted today. So just to know that you're going to get in that. We do have a really good specific question and time for it that just got dropped in the chat. So I'm going to read it aloud for our panelists to respond to. So based on your experience, how long does a parole sponsor wait to be approved? And if an immigrant is from one of those 4 countries with the agreement with Mexico, Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, do they need to have a particular phone, like an iPhone, to be so informed and continue in the process? So maybe how long are folks waiting for a sponsor?
Yes, so it depends. Actually, we were discussing that last night. We see people who applied back in January who are still waiting. The way they have it is not first come, first serve. Which creates a lot of issues, because you imagine somebody who applied in February still waiting, and somebody who applied in May got their appointment to come. So there is no specific time, but we are looking at up to 90 days in some cases, from the time you apply to the time you actually get the final result and be able to get the person into the country. That's the first answer. What was the other question again, Lisa?
Something about with the folks from Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, or Venezuela, do they need to have because that's a different process now for them, do they need to have something different to continue in the process?
Yes, so it's a 2-step program. So the first part is for the sponsor to start the process to apply. And then the second part is for the beneficiary to have access to the CBP1 app. It's not the same way as the one when people are in Mexico, but it is the same app that is being used for different purpose. So for the sponsorship program, it's a 2-step. The sponsor in the US starts the process by filling out the form. Once the form is filled out, then the beneficiary will also need to create an account. And then the person you are sponsoring, the sponsor, and our humanitarian director, the 3 of them will be guiding through the process until the person gets here.
Thanks. And I don't know if either of you, I can fill in a little bit around this question around folks who are being bused to different cities. I know that in the past month in May in New York, buses were received once again, but it's kind of being done in a different process and kind of being in a more hidden and secretive way. And so there's concerns about how are those getting monitored from human rights groups and that sort of thing. So I don't know if either of you have a little bit of take on busing.
You want to take that first, and I can add? So what we are seeing across the country, I'm currently in New York, and as you know, in DC, in other places in Massachusetts, and you've heard in California, they just sent a plane to the governor's house, last week. So what we are seeing is those people are also asylum seekers, so they have the same status. They are being released on deportation, and they have to hire or find an organization like Haitian Bridge Alliance or Kino or the Flores Project and others to be able to hopefully help them with the legal case. So they are all being released on deportation to continue the process. So they all have the same status as asylum seekers.
Thanks for that. And any final words of hope of what, again, I think this is illuminating and also relates to the fact that this is a very confusing process and we're only 1 month into this new policy officially. So any final words from either of you before we close out?
I mean, I think my words of hope are just thank you for being here. And I'm seeing 76 people on this call. I mean, it's so important that we're all trying to learn about what's happening, that we're all participating in advocacy at the local level, state level, whatever it is. So that's inspiring to me. We continue to have volunteers who come to Kino, for example, that inspire me every day. Volunteers who are both from the US and come to stay for a while, and volunteers who are Mexican, have lived in Nogales all their lives, and they come, you know, multiple times a week to help us serve food. So, you know, people are there, we're there, we will be there, and we welcome your support. The one other thing I just wanted to share is an extra resource. We worked with Human Rights First and Florence Project to publish a little report recently that was really led by a colleague at Human Rights First. That was kind of it's a snapshot of what is happening right now in Nogales specifically. This kind of, you know, wait list line I was referring to, because there's a whole host of challenges that we're seeing around people waiting in that line trying to seek asylum. So I'll just, I want to drop it to everyone in the chat, which I'll do. And that's just another resource if people want to learn more. It's a really well-documented piece that just came out this week or the week previous.
Yes, thank you so much, Zoe, for that. And Lisa, I will say I don't have access to the report that was released a couple of weeks ago as a result of the Title 42 ending. We'll share that with you, and you can share it with everyone. Honestly, what gives me hope, and I have a lot of stories, really, that's what keeps me going every day. I was in Tijuana last weekend, and I met a group of people, and they were hungry. They were there 3 days without food. And I took them, I took them to a place they ate, and one of them looked at me and said, "Why are you helping me?" And I said, "Because you're my brother." And he said, "But why are you helping us?" And I said, "Because I would have really hoped that if I am in a position that somebody else will have, helped me as well." And he said, "I have never seen this. It seems too good to be true, but looking at you, I understand that God has sent you so we can get the help that we need." So that's what gives me hope. Every time God uses us to be his feet, his hands, his mouth to feed somebody, and they see God through us, that's what gives me hope. With all the pain, with all the headache, with all the people dying, but to be able to touch somebody and they feel God through you, and to know that by serving that person, you are serving entire families, entire communities, entire countries, that's what gives me hope.
Amen. Thanks, Guerline. Zoe and Guerline, I'd love to, if you feel comfortable, if we can send you with a blessing to send you out in your work, knowing that you are really on the front lines and working with a lot of folks. So I just invite people to take a posture of prayer as we send a little virtual blessing to both of you. So Guerline and Zoe, may God be close to you. May you experience deep energy and fortitude and grace in your work. May you know that we accompany you in prayer, in our financial support, in the ways that we seek to change narratives. May you continue to be Christ's hands and feet wherever you go. And may you know that we are with you and that Christ is with you. Amen. deep gratitude to both of you and your
Thank
deep
you so
work.
much. Please
That is
keep
really powerful.
please keep Anna's family in your prayer. We could feel the energy from the mother earlier today. It's going to be a really hard weekend, you know, as she will be able to bury her daughter. Now imagine that she made the journey from Panama to Honduras, back to Honduras, to the Darien, and her baby died in her hand, in custody, after begging for medical support. And they refused to give the baby the medical care that she needed. So this weekend is going to be very heavy because this is, you know, she'll finally be able to say goodbye and bury her child that she made the journey with. And as soon as she arrived on US soil, her little girl died. So,
Thanks. So we'll continue to hold Anadith and her family and all those who've been left as disposable. And we pray for those. Again, deep gratitude to all of you for joining us tonight. Certainly a sobering time, and also a chance for us to get informed and to be advocates for good. So blessings on your week, all of you, and know that we continue to send our energy and our good work here. And take care.
Thank you.
Feel free to come off mute and say thank you if you wish. We'll stop the recording.
Thank you.
you.